welcome back to another episode of The Crossroads. I'm your host, Rashida Green, and this is the show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight with skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power. And we are breaking down stereotypes one episode at a time. Now, if you can't tell from the foolish trepidation in my voice, it is New Year's Eve, and I'm sipping on a little something, and I thought that I would just come to you guys and that I would just, rap a little bit and actually do what I'm calling one for the road. So I have talked to you all in some bits about the craziness that I have endured this year, and it has, for the most part, slowed down at this point. I am finally done with my master's program. Yes, I'm a mostly free woman, but like any person that is just constantly doing and moving and shaking, I'm really not fully taking a break. Please don't tell Brandy, because she has definitely been someone, really everyone, it's not just her, but she's the most vocal about it. As you can tell from all the conversations that she and I have had this year, without giving away too much, I really just wanted to talk to you guys, tell you all what it has meant to me, even though I have not been able to be as regular as I've wanted to, and I've had some lulls because of school and other personal things, that you guys have bared with me, and I appreciate that. And I guarantee you that, I'm marinating on how to make 2021 much better. I'm really not going to update my vision board. I've already decided I'm just going to scratch out the 0 and put a 1 over it, because a lot of them goals did not get met, not due to, any kind of lack of perseverance on my part. I'm just saying it just didn't happen, because other things was happening. Right. Anyway. So, we're going to start this off like we normally started off by giving some flowers. So on this day, New Year's Eve, I actually just want to give flowers to everyone on the collective, all my listeners, every person that I've worked with this year, all of my guests and residents. That's Brandy, of course, Misha, and Seema, Professor Seema, and just all of my podcast friends that I've met along the way. I want to give everyone flowers for just making it to the finish line, because my God, the struggles. So that's the flowers. I really don't have anything specifically planned, and I need to get off of here before this drink in my cup kicks in and I start just completely going off the rails. So before that happens, I will spare you guys. I actually just wanted to, as part of this one last hurrah, I just wanted to share a bit of my personal success, one of the things that I am proud of this year, because, I know we're all really upset about the plastic bag full of goo, Mitch McConnell, and stunt queen extraordinaire, Doofus Trump. We know that we were expecting to get a little more coinage than what we're actually planning to get. And we're disappointed about that. There's a lot of fears and things about this vaccine, a lot of questions, a lot of things are happening, things that we talked about earlier on in this year that were very unexpected, which were the possibility that, COVID, this virus would mutate, and we'll look at God. So I wanted to share a little bit of my own personal success. And I was actually allowed to be a guest professor, a guest lecturer at UDC. And Professor Seema, allowed me to speak to her urban sustainability students about genetically modified foods and genetically modified foods and as well as some of the experiments that we're doing on insects as well, specifically mosquitoes. So, and it's actually really funny because I got trolled by a mosquito account on Twitter. It was just really disrespectful. It was funny, but just the disrespect. And yes, if you are not following me on Twitter, I don't know what you're doing because it's mostly me not talking about the environment. Like, if you want me to talk about the environment, obviously the show, the website, and Instagram. But if you just want to listen to me cut up with an occasional, oh my God, the trash, that's Twitter. I'm really just on there with people just cutting up or cutting up by myself normally. So, yeah. So that's what's going on with me. So I just want to share a little bit of that, a little bit of some good news with you all so that you wouldn't think, geez, she just abandoned us and Lord knows what she's doing. And I'm still doing things. I'm still active, you know. It's just some things had to take a little bit of a side step. So I actually have an update on the next episode. It's kind of a little bit of a spoiler. I haven't been able to do this. Like, I haven't been able to tell you all what's coming on the next episode because most of the time I didn't know. I had no idea. It was as much of a mystery to me as it was to you. So this time we can remove the veil a little bit, and I'm actually going to make good on a promise or maybe a threat I made in a previous episode where I mentioned that I was going to be reading an essay that talked about The Hills Have Eyes, the movies plural, and nuclear testing. And what have I been doing? Your girl has been researching. Yes, yes. Yeah. So that's coming. That's coming soon. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. So I am bringing you guys this episode ahead of the new year, and I will be back ready to rock and roll in mid-January. I'm slated to come back the week of the 18th of January. Just give myself a little bit of time to adjust to things. Other things, at work are kind of changing a little bit. So once things get back to kind of a calmer state, I will be back to being regularly out here in these streets, giving you guys the good word. And shout out to everybody on Instagram who let me know, and Twitter too, who let me know some topics that you wanted me to cover. I know I gave some fairly vague, general, high level subjects that I wanted to cover, during the course of this year and for this new season specifically. And, it was good. I think it's a good place to start, but I really also wanted to tap into, the collective, tap into the community and see what folks really wanted me to talk about. So I've got some good ideas, and I will be using this break, air quotes, because, I don't really know what a break means. I'll be using my time to get things ready and get back out. So I appreciate everyone's patience. I appreciate all the love and support that you guys give me. And yes, I hope you enjoy this lecture. Okay. First, thank you all so much for coming to class today, and also for allowing me to give this lecture. My name is Rashida Green, as we've already been told, and I do hold a master's degree in urban sustainability, which I did receive from Antioch University. I also have a bachelor's in biology, so I am going to warn you that this may be a little sciencey, a little more technically sciencey, but I will break things down. I will explain things to the best of my ability, and you can ask me questions as they come up, either in the chat, and we will get onto it and address it. So getting into a little bit more detail, specifically about my podcast, The Crossroads. So I actually started this as part of my capstone project. So if you decide to continue on with higher education, these are the things that you can look forward to, is having to create a project that really summarizes what you learned during the process of your time in college or your time in your grad program. So as a part of my program, I created this podcast, and I wanted to explore some of the topics that I had come into my program with questions, specifically about mass incarceration, which is a lot of my activism that I do on the side, but also wanting to see how that related to the environment. And interestingly enough, I found a lot of links and just some examples, which you probably are aware of. If folks are living in a low income, quote unquote, neighborhood, obviously they are more likely to be exposed to food insecurity, which means that they have to drive or go a distance of greater than 1.5 miles, depending on where you live, to find access to healthy and nutritious food. And folks who are in these kinds of living conditions are also more likely to experience incarceration, or have a relative or family member also to experience incarceration as well. So I was really interested in that, and I wanted to keep exploring it. And really what I found about the environment, specifically environmental justice, is that there were already tons of people doing the work. There are so many organizations locally in our area and around the country that are already engaged. So I thought, well, instead of reinventing the wheel, instead of just coming in and thinking I have all the answers, why don't I look to the folks that are already doing the work and amplify the message? But on top of that, and in addition to that, I also wanted to make sure that I had a message for myself. So I created the show, and I have a couple of different methods in which I like to present information. One of them is case study, which you guys are participating in as being part of this lecture, and also interviews where I just get with folks and talk to them directly about the work that they are doing, about their lived experience, etc. And my show covers environmental justice, which, if folks are just kind of getting new or getting information about that term and what that means, environmental justice is really an offshoot movement from civil rights, mainly focusing on the disenfranchisement of environmental burdens. So when we think about environmental burdens, we're talking about things such as incinerators, landfills, and historically, these are placed in poor Black and brown communities. And out of that came the necessity to really fight back against the injustice that was going on. And a lot of folks spent a lot of time, especially in the mid to late 70s and the 80s as well, really fighting these battles. So I encourage you, if you have a chance, to look up Dumping in Dixie by Dr. Robert Bullard. He's written several other books as well, but that one in particular, I actually did an episode about that, but it actually includes about 5 cities in the country, predominantly in the South, that were experiencing some form of environmental injustice, environmental racism. So definitely recommend checking that out for folks. So let's get into this case study. So the purpose of the case study, and also just this presentation in general, is really to show that there are some parallels between human intervention or human innovation and the direct result or the direct impact on the environment. Unfortunately, that is often a negative impact, because as we're going to see and to discuss, most of the times when we make these innovations, it's not with the idea of how this will impact the natural environment that the built environment depends on. So mosquitoes. So I don't know about anybody else. I'll just speak for myself. When I get bitten by mosquitoes, I swell up. It's a mess, and I'm itchy, and I can't, and they all never bite me in opportune places. It's always the back of my elbow or something where it's very difficult to reach. And I do not react, my skin does not react well to this. So there's a lot of places, particularly in the South, and right now the focus is really on Florida and the Florida Keys. But there are several cities, also Texas, and countries, Panama and the Cayman Islands, that have agreed to release genetically modified mosquitoes into the environment. This was recently approved. This received approval from the state of Florida. It received approval from the CDC to proceed. There was a period of time where there were questions asked by the public that were addressed in a very long document that I did skim through, to address some of the concerns from environmental groups in the state of Florida. But the issue is that the Florida Keys is being inundated with mosquitoes, one particular variety of mosquito that is causing a lot of issues. So their solution was to create this specific mosquito, OX5034, which is actually from the company called Oxitec. And that's it's a UK-based company. And they have been working diligently with like I mentioned, Florida and Texas as well to get this rolled out. So this was approved, I believe, last month, and it's going into effect starting next year. So so why do you, like, just asking guys, why do you think this is a big deal? Like, from your perspective, I know I'm kind of cheating as you can see the answers, but from your perspective, why do you think it's a big deal? William?
Well, I think it's two sides. One side, you have people who feel like they're uncomfortable with mosquitoes, even though mosquitoes have been here since we've been here, right?
Yeah.
And so they're looking at it from a new age perspective of, okay, well, they're going to modify a mosquito to get rid of other mosquitoes, but they're not taking into consideration what else is coming behind that. And I think when you try to play creator, you're doing something that you haven't done. So now you're going to unleash something else. It's almost like opening up Pandora's box.
Okay. I see two other folks have their hands raised. I believe Dimitri.
So the first thing I can think is it can also affect other ecosystems through the. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It can also affect other ecosystems through the trophic levels. In terms of, a thought, for example, that would pre hunt on mosquitoes. Basically is gonna have food. However, the mosquito who wasn't causing in the trophic level wasn't causing any serious harm to other levels. Now, if this is some toxic or I don't know, like all these GMO stuff, but if it's affecting, let's say, some predator, there might be some population increase of some other trophic level decrease of the other, that's what I'm thinking right now.
I think I apologize, I just closed it so I couldn't see who also had their hand. Glindy.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So I was gonna say that I think it's a good thing because mosquitoes carry a lot of diseases, and I think that's the positive side to all of this.
Okay. And what I want to say also as we're entering into this discussion about GMO is that we've been genetically modifying things for 30,000 years. So this isn't new, but I think that some initial things and some various things that we have modified, and some of the quickest and most easiest examples that come to my mind are seedless watermelon. And there are some benefits to having modifications to certain organisms. I mean, for example, corn. Corn as it was originally grown was not that edible. It didn't taste very good. It was difficult to get to. But over the years, over time, it has been modified to what it is today. But we are also going to talk about the opposite side of this. So some of the notes that I have here in regards to why this is important is because, yes, while male mosquitoes don't bite, so the idea about this is that these mosquitoes would mate with the female mosquitoes who do bite, and they would pass on the gene that to not either the female eggs would die in the larval stage, so they'd never become. But there's also the idea that if they are male mosquitoes, that they will just continue to pass on this gene to their offspring, and that will be that. The issue here is that there's an antibiotic that has to be used to create this modification to the mosquito. And if you guys know anything about antibiotics, what generally tends to happen if there's more of it introduced into an environment? Any ideas? Any thoughts?
Resistance.
Bingo. Becomes resistant. So that is one of the main concerns voiced by the public in regards to introducing these mosquitoes into the wild. And yes, we also are unaware completely, even though there was evidence in the report indicating that there wasn't necessarily a significant impact on wildlife, but there's several animals who feed on mosquitoes, like bats, like dragonflies. And the concern is when you introduce these changes into an environment, the concern is how will it adapt? Will it be able to maintain a certain level of biodiversity? And the other big deal is that what's really bringing about these changes, what's really disrupting and causing mosquitoes to be such a problem is really climate change. Summers, particularly in Florida, are very long. There's a very long period of time where it's very warm. And because of climate change and the storms are more violent, we can see that right now with the hurricane season. We have run out of alphabetical names and have now moved on to the Greek alphabet. You know, and I think this is that we were tied with the number of storms that we've had this year with 2005, in which Hurricane Katrina occurred. So we are in the midst, and we are clearly seeing that there is an impact to climate based upon human activity. And so when we're talking about these mosquitoes, they have a longer period of time in which to live and survive. Female mosquitoes can survive for up to 2 months. So that's a long period of time to go, also carrying disease and being of a nuisance. So there is a necessity for human intervention to kind of help to assuage what's going on. But we still have to be cognizant and explore if these are going to cause other issues, other ramifications. So now before I move on to plastic, are there any questions? No? Oh, a couple questions. Let's see.
So can I speak, or should I wait till someone else speak? Okay. So I do understand that there are issues that we're having with mosquitoes, but this keeps playing on my mind about all the different things happening around the world. And one of the reasons why I got into urban sustainability, because I always try to figure out a natural way to find a solution to a problem. And the reason why that is because I view the ecosystem the same way I view my body. The body is self-healing.
Yes.
So if you do certain things, you're able to recover. But this method, to me, is not a natural method. And 15, 20 years down the road, when we see what comes of it, then I'd like to see what people think in terms of if it was a good idea.
That part. But, on the other side of that too is, do we have 15 to 20 years? I mean, that's the other side of this as well. I think, William, you had your hand raised?
That was me who just spoke.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Glindy, I apologize. Please go on.
I wanted to ask, you said we don't, in that statement, the last statement you just said, you said we don't have 15 to 20 years. Do you believe that the federal government has an obligation to follow the United Nations report that says we have to keep our global temperature rise at 1.5, which is, it's done by reducing emissions 40 to 60% by the year 2030. Do you agree with that, or do you think like other estimates that say 2035 or are appropriate or unrealistic? I mean,
I think a few things. I think this concept of waiting this long is really for business. It's not so much addressing the real issues of why it's so important that we do what we're doing as far as reducing our emissions. It's more about giving businesses an opportunity to figure out how they're going to recoup what their loop is losing potentially by changing their methodology. I mean, for example, McDonald's is talking about they're going to switch to all biodegradable products. I think it's around I think it's 2030 or around that point where they're going to make the full transition. But they're starting to do these practices now. And the reality is that, single-use plastic, as we will get into, deserves a lot more attention and urgency than 2035. Like, we have multiple garbage patches full of garbage. And as I'll get into more in depth, plastic does not biodegrade. There is nothing about plastic that the natural environment can use. So when it breaks down, it just breaks down into smaller pieces, which has a very negative impact on aquatic life, as we will get into. Did that answer your question? So I personally, I think that waiting that
Yes,
long
thank you.
you're welcome, is unrealistic, because we don't have that kind of time. Like, the storms are getting worse. We're talking about, we're seeing played out on television with California right now. It's on fire. And this isn't just, the wildfires that are even starting because of just like naturally. These are also being created and caused by human intervention, from gender reveals. That's a whole other show. Okay. Up, Seema.
So I just wanted to give it just another perspective on this, and the students, you'll see it later on in today during this lecture, but mosquitoes kill more than any other animal on the planet. And in the US, maybe it's not as fatal, but in other countries, between dengue, malaria, yellow fever, and this particular mosquito, I think it's called Asian tiger colloquially, is a major problem. And there have been, on the other side, trying to roll out vaccines. So as an example, I've been following dengue, and they tried to roll it out in the Philippines. And in the process, they killed children that didn't even have dengue the first time. And it's very hard, I think, like when we're evaluating this, like that sense of urgency, that timeline, short run, long run gains. But that being said, is that the point that you're raising, that it has this antibiotic, and then other animals are ingesting it, and what's the long-term consequence of that, and even down to us, right, along that chain. And just to also just reflect on your example of corn, I didn't know this, but there's a gastroenterologist based in DC who talks about everyone should avoid corn, because the US has modified corn so much that now when we ingest it, it has, I can't remember if it's B35, D30 something, we're ingesting a pesticide with every kernel of the corn now. I think the exception being blue corn. So it's a very complex issue, and so thank you for broaching this subject, but I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, no problem. And just going back very quickly to GMO, there are benefits, as I mentioned, the types of foods that we have been able to cultivate over the years. But there's also benefits to farmers as well, because a lot of GMO foods are drought resistant, and that's helps farmers obviously to be able to maintain their crops and maintain it for profit. So, but again, all the things that I'm talking about are economic based. They're not necessarily what we're talking about for the environment. And as I'm sure you all are learning with sustainability, we have to include the environment as one of the 3 E's of sustainability, in addition to equity and economy. So moving forward with plastic, so as you all can see on the screen, and as you know, we use plastic all the time. Sometimes I use plastic bags in a pinch to deep condition my hair. I use plastic bags for my dog. There are ways, and difficult ways, I would mention, to where using plastic is almost a necessity. And we really can see from some of the examples and the timeline here that we've been at the plastic game for a long time. And it has really been a service to companies, service to us as well, in helping us to preserve things longer and carry things around. But they also have, plastic has a very harmful side effect as well. The perspective I'm going to be coming from in addressing plastic is really in the terms of medical waste. So have you all ever thought about what happens to medical supplies after they're used? Has anyone ever thought about that, or thought about what may happen to it at all?
I think I read an article yesterday that incinerated by medical waste incinerators or something?
Yes, you're exactly right. So back in the days, hospitals just burn their own trash, which if that doesn't kind of freak you out, I don't know. But hospitals are burning their own garbage, and yes, there is a certain level of biohazard material that can't just be put into a landfill, right? Which is where some medical waste ends up, but a lot of it is burned. And burning of trash creates a lot of very harmful chemicals, mercury, and I mentioned dioxin on the slide, which is actually a byproduct and comes from waste incineration and also pesticide manufacturing. And for extra credit, I would recommend folks take a look at Roundup, the actual product Roundup. Because there's actually been modifications to food to make it resistant to herbicide. So look that up too. Actually, the company that owns Roundup was just very much so sued recently for their products being linked to causing cancer. So, when your spare time, take a look at that and get some more information. But yes, hospitals are burning their own garbage, and burning things puts bad stuff into the environment. And as I mentioned, plastic does not biodegrade. Excuse me. So it just goes into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics. They get into the water, obviously, through various means. When we're talking about plastic in the sense of the landfill, there's opportunity for some of that garbage to seep into the groundwater via the aquifers underground, which flows back into our water, into our drinking water via the water cycle. So it's also harming aquatic life as well by being ingested. And then if we're using a fish, for example, if a fish has a high concentration of microplastics inside and that is plucked from the water to be served to you at Red Lobster, you are also ingesting microplastics. And unfortunately, they are in our water among other things. And the earth produces a lot of medical waste. So getting a little bit more into, and I don't know this man, I just used his picture on the website, but getting more into something locally, we've got Curtis Bay Energy, which is actually located in Baltimore. And this is one of the largest medical waste incinerators in the US. Baltimore is also home of the Wheelabrator incinerator, which doesn't specialize in medical waste. It's just general waste that it burns. But this is a massive place. And and Curtis Bay is actually considered to be a very, very polluted area in Baltimore. In fact, in 2005, Baltimore had some of the worst air pollution, and there have been dramatic steps over the years to try to rectify that, but obviously it's still an issue. I would go a step further and say that another side of this as well is that there's a lot of interest. There was interest in bringing another incinerator into Baltimore, and residents were looking forward to this. Some of them were, because it creates jobs. And this is, again, the other side of when we're talking about the environment, the concessions that folks will make for the idea or the prospect of money. So I'm just gonna leave that there. Oh, but before I move on, are there any questions or comments?
So you made a comment about that the earth creates medical waste, or you're talking about hospitals?
Humans.
Oh, you mean humans?
I just meant
Okay.
It was a global thing, not like
Okay.
the earth itself. It's like, I'm just gonna make some no, I meant the human beings.
I got you.
Do you know anything about the statistics right now of how COVID is impacting medical waste?
Oh man. I do not have statistics offhand. I will say that there has been absolutely an influx of seeing more medical supplies just blatantly in the ocean, particularly masks. They are everywhere, and And it's interesting because, for the onslaught of COVID, it was considered to be okay to maybe use plastic because we were uncertain fully of how it transmits. We were uncertain or not being given the full picture of the symptoms. It was changing rapidly. So it was sort of a good thing to have something that we know is disposable, but ultimately it's having and continues to have an adverse effect. I should definitely get some stats on that. Thank you for that recommendation. Unfortunately, I don't have any off the top of my head.
No, thank you.
No problem. Okay.
Question?
Oh, sure.
Yes. Some of this medical supplies is is made from the glass. Is that also has some effect for the environment?
You're asking if the mosquitoes biting has is that, I'm sorry.
No. Okay. Some of the medical waste is like it's made from the glasses.
Yes.
Not the plastic. It does also have any effect or affecting the environment? The glass.
Yes. Because that has to be burned. So biohazard, which is, gowns soiled with blood or any other form of bodily fluid, all of that cannot be taken to a landfill. So it would not end up at, forgot where there's a local landfill, but they would not end up in a landfill. It would actually go to an incinerator, probably Curtis Bay, to be burned because it can't just be disposed of. The other side of this as well, and actually thank you for reminding me of this, is that there is a subsect of medical waste that can in fact be recycled, but the blame that they're trying to put on it is that medical staff is not being trained on how to properly do it. And isn't that interesting? Because that also sounds like what the blame is tried to be placed on consumers for not knowing how to properly recycle. Like, have you seen all the different types of possibilities of where to put a cardboard box or how to classify styrofoam? It varies. And not varies, it's a lot, it's complicated, and it is not very well explained. And no one is trying to do any kind of sorting at 10 o'clock at night when they're taking the garbage out. They just want to throw it away. And so it puts the pressure on the consumer in the same way it puts the pressure on medical staff, folks who are just trying to do their jobs. It puts pressure on them to figure it out. So we're not further along in the environment because folks don't know how to sort their garbage. Is that really it? Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So by this point in the show, this is the section that I would call the crossroads. So the crossroads is really the place where we bring all of this information together. So at first we talked about genetically modified mosquitoes, getting into a little bit of information about our background about the history of genetically modified organisms or GMOs. And we also talked about medical waste briefly, but definitely talking about medical waste, the issue of it, and also noting that we have a massive, largest in the US, medical waste incinerator not too far from where we all live, in driving distance from us, in fact. So why is all of this important and why does this matter? On one hand, yes, genetically modified food has helped and supported us. It does in some ways provide benefits to farmers who, as we know, are struggling and definitely have challenges. And offering GMOs is something that could help to kind of to decrease that in some ways. However, there is also an opportunity or opportunities to negatively impact biodiversity. As we see with these mosquitoes, we really don't know fully what the impact is. And I would like to say that having the CDC sign off on this makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, but it honestly does not. We can see from what we're experiencing right now that the federal government specifically, has had a history of not doing the right thing by its people. I mean, right now, many of our core environmental laws have been basically, destroyed with the intent of building a border wall. And this isn't the only incident that this has happened. I mean, if you have a chance, I would definitely recommend folks taking a look at Love Canal in New York. It's actually a very popular, a very well-known and documented environmental issue. It was actually built over over mounds and mounds of waste, and folks were invited to come and live in this neighborhood, in this area, and were not properly warned or told about the negative environmental burdens that their houses were being built upon. And, Erin Brockovich is another person in that movie, and her work is another very, very well-known referenced example of folks having to deal with environmental burdens. So we're bringing all this together to say that, especially when we're talking about GMOs, that there is opportunity to negatively impact the natural environment. As I mentioned, with the use of tetracycline, which is an antibiotic, there is a chance to create a resistance, an antibiotic resistance. And we all know what happens when that occurs, that it's harder to eradicate certain diseases because of that. GMOs also introduce the opportunity for food allergies. I mean, 20 years ago, were we talking about gluten? I don't know that in my lifetime that's been anything that I had to be concerned about. But when we're constantly making modifications to food for longer shelf life, for resistance to drought, we are also introducing opportunities for food allergies to come up as well. And then when we're talking about plastic pollution from the perspective of medical waste, while we understand that we do have to dispose of our medical waste, we also have to understand too that a lot of this medical waste, some of it is single-use plastics, and they are just ending up being incinerated, and they are releasing harmful chemicals into the atmosphere. And if we're thinking about the natural environment, I mean, what are the 3 areas that are or 2 or 3 areas that are likely to be impacted? Our water, our soil, and the air. And if you're burning something, there's byproducts. It has to go somewhere. There is no waste in the environment. There is no waste. So everything, and what I mean by that is everything has to go somewhere. It has to serve some function. So for burning trash, or for burning anything, what comes out? Smoke. So, and in this particular case, when we're talking about incinerating of medical waste, I mentioned dioxin. There's benzene for actual trash burning. There's a lot of very harsh and harmful chemicals that get released into the atmosphere. And these things contribute to the climate change that we are currently seeing. This is why we have hotter, longer summers, more intense storms, and places like Florida are feeling the brunt of this by having such issues and prolonged issues with mosquitoes. So I mentioned, just some final thoughts, I did mention already the concept of global warming. And I also wanted to bring into the topic, this idea of waste to energy. If folks get an opportunity, I definitely recommend, I have an episode called Let It Burn, where I actually go into depth talking about the Wheelabrator incinerator in Baltimore, and how they used the tactic of calling it waste to energy as a means to justify continuously burning trash. And just so folks know, trash burning is considered to be a sustainable practice. I wish I was lying. I wish I was making that up, but it's actually considered to be a sustainable practice. And this concept of waste to energy is very interesting because it gives the idea that somehow this waste is going towards powering our homes. But the reality is that very little power is generated by burning waste. It is not something that we could solely depend on, as opposed to the current system, the current methods that we are utilizing. That's not feasible. And there are other ways, like solar, like hydropower, that would probably be a little less harmful than just flat out burning garbage. But these are the tactics that corporations will use to make consumers think that this is actually a benefit to them, on top of the idea of loss of employment. But the reality is that the neighborhood that specifically the Wheelabrator incinerator is close to is low income. Folks can see haze when they wake up in the mornings, and it affects their, they have their higher incidences of asthma. So again, we're seeing that while these are supposed to be or considered to be innovations, that they actually are having adverse effects. So the question someone might ask is, well, is it really worth it? And that's something that I hope you all can explore a little bit more in depth. So with that, are there any final questions or thoughts?
I'm just wondering, is there a big push in the urban sustainability field to adapt? Because I'm a big advocate of the circular economy, and is there a big push for that as well as the concept of zero waste?
Yes. So and you know, the funny thing about zero waste is that it can't be successful or sustainable unless we've got all the players involved. And by the players, I mean, it has to come from legislators, because right now, as it stands, it is not sustainable to be zero waste. I can't even begin to be zero waste. I make jokes about throwing some food scraps into the woods. I do not recommend that either. Don't do that. Please don't listen to me. That's a terrible idea. But the concept of zero waste is doable, but it is hard and made harder because we do not have the infrastructure in place to make sure that it happens. For example, composting. If anyone's ever been to Tacoma Park in Maryland, on the Maryland side, they offer compost services. But if you just so happen to live on the other side, right outside of the line, the designation, you can't participate in that program. So your waste, your food, for composting, your food scraps are just probably going to end up in the landfill like everything else. Now, if there was a massive program, countywide, citywide, that allowed folks to be able to properly compost their food, that is a way for folks to become a little bit more in alignment with zero waste. But that's not where it ends, because a lot of the stuff that we get and just as going back to plastic very quickly, a lot of the plastic waste comes from packaging, and that's single use. So, you know, we have to also have to think about that as well. Any other questions?
I have a question. You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Have we developed a way to filter out the smoke coming from burning trash?
No.
Filter? No, I don't know. I'm just, trying to figure out if there's like another way to kind of recycle that,
To my knowledge, no, there hasn't been any sort of measure of how to do it. There are a few approaches that folks are looking at. One thing, the popular thing that you may have heard of is called carbon offsetting, which is just basically like a methodology that allows for companies to pay into a tax in essence, or pay into a pot that is supposed to help offset the use of their carbon. And concepts like that, for me, are not stringent enough, because again, it's still, and it's like I was mentioning as far as this last bullet I have about geoengineering, that these kinds of solutions are what they are considered to be false solutions. This idea that, we're offsetting the carbon, so it's not that bad. No, you need to reduce our carbon. We can't offset it.
Are you talking about like a tax break?
It's a tax, yes. In essence, it's partially, yeah. And it's not enough. It's not enough at all. Like, we have to do a lot more than just concern ourselves about giving tax breaks. We have to actually visibly reduce our carbon. And I mean, carbon dioxide, I'm sure folks know, carbon dioxide occurs naturally. It's what we breathe out as a byproduct of respiration, but it is also used by plants for photosynthesis. And as a result, they give us oxygen. So you can kind of see if you cut all the trees down, no oxygen. So I think we have to be a little bit more vigilant about how we intend to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that's currently in the environment. And part of that is the fossil fuels that we emit. So I would say that, you know, if we're going to really, how will we go about making this possible? There's actually something called, it's called the high carbon approach, where folks are actually investing in highly populated forested areas, and using that methodology in the natural environment, that depending on where folks live, as a means to support the reduction of carbon dioxide in the environment. Did that answer your question? Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hello?
Yes. Is that
Yeah, is there any difference? How much? Is there a difference microplastic? I don't understand what's microplastic.
okay?
It's different than the regular plastic?
Yes. So just for folks, so when you think about plastics, and a common product is styrene. So if you think about, so poly means more than one. So we're talking about polystyrene. It's just long chains, right? So as I mentioned, there is nothing that in plastic, because it is man-made, there is nothing in plastic that the natural environment can use. So it does not biodegrade. It just breaks into smaller pieces. So nanoparticles, I believe they are classified as being, I think, around 3 nanometers or something like that. They're very, very, very small. And they're macroplastics as well. And in essence, when we think about anything, you think about a cup, a red Solo plastic cup. Instead of that biodegrading and just kind of going into something else, it just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And that is, we think about, heck, if we think about contact lenses, and this is something that Seema and I have talked about too, that those are also plastic. And so if you think about just like a contact lens that you take out and you just throw it in the toilet, if you're like me, telling on myself, when you do that, it doesn't just dissolve magically or nicely. It breaks into smaller pieces, and those pieces, it doesn't go anywhere. It's not absorbed. It's not even if it is consumed, it is consumed as is. It is with no benefit to whoever is consuming it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Dimitri, I see you have your hand up, and I think there was a few other folks too. Make sure.
I only have a question on your activism around mass incarceration and
Sure.
like urban sustainability. So I'm interested in finding ways to basically, I'm not calling it a community service, but people who have been convicted and jailed for minor crimes, mostly connected to poverty, or like even, I don't know, something else that comes to mind, like marijuana possession charges. People have been staying in jail for like 50 years in some states, right? So my idea is to get these people who are mostly deriving from poverty, and this is what leads them to some crime, and have them to educate. And again, it's not community service, like that they will still get paid. It's not slavery or something, right? Educate them on any community projects, community gardens, whatever, you know. And then after they are done with their like, you know, the legal penalty they had to pay, let's say, for their crime, they basically have an educational background. So after they're done with it, they don't go back to crime. They do have something to work on. are you doing anything around that stuff, or can you lead me in any like way somehow?
Sure. So it sounds like you're talking about reentry. Is that correct? It's what I hear you saying.
What's that?
And
I'm sorry.
it sounds like you're talking about reentry. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's actually a few organizations. Unfortunately, the ones I'm going to mention, one in particular is called Out for Justice. And it's an excellent organization. They are based in Baltimore, but they are very, very effective as far as recidivism and making certain that when folks come out that they have the tools and the resources that they need. Specifically, what they do is they actually help folks learn about public policy. They teach them how to advocate for themselves, in addition to helping them to come out of jail and have the resources and access that they need. Because reentry is one is ripe for surveillance in terms of the completion of sentences and the work with the parole officer afterwards. So that's what we consider to be surveillance, house arrest, things of that nature. And it is very easy and very prevalent for folks to end up going right back into jail. So I would definitely look into Out for Justice, another really great organization. And again, I'm not going to give you places close by because that's not how my brain works. So I would also recommend looking into Homeboy Industries. They have an excellent reentry program. They every
Can you spell that again?
Homeboys, HOMEBOY, yeah, apostrophe S, and they're actually based in LA. And they have an excellent reentry program. Another smaller organization that's local is called One by One, run by a man named Eddie Ellis. He's actually a colleague of mine, and he was formerly incarcerated himself and dedicated his life and his time to helping other folks who are struggling with incarceration. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question.
Sure.
Yes.
I can't see you. Where are you?
Muhammad Ali, yeah.
Oh, yes, I see you. Hello.
Yes, hello. Is the snow helping to absorb the CO2 or helping, making any help or clean the airs? I hear something like that. I'm not sure.
You said snow?
The snow, yeah. When it's fall, it just help to like absorb some of this carbon or whatever is the waste from this medical waste.
I actually have never heard that about snow, which is in practice, it doesn't really sound. I'd have to do some research on it, which is my default answer for most things, because I don't really know exactly how. I don't see.
I hear that is produce more oxygen, so and that will balance some of the.
I can jump in.
The problem from the waste of the burning this stuff, we're getting more carbon, right? Or CO2, right? So
yes.
When oxygen is coming, reduce a little bit of that. I hear it. I'm not sure that's right.
I'll have to research that. I haven't heard of that. Seema, I think you got me. Seema, I think you were going to say something.
I was going to add. So I think that there is some evidence that for precipitation more broadly. So like we have acid rain, it can capture some of it. But I think the broader problem is it may exit one system and enter another. So it's not actually solving per se one specific problem, it's just shifting it a little bit, like how we were talking about in the first lecture. It's like this game of whack-a-mole that we're constantly playing with the environment. You solve one, right? You eliminate some type of toxicity at one level, and then it just shifts elsewhere. It's never really overall from the system. But I do believe snow or broadly precipitation does play a similar role, that it can do that as well. Assuming it's not evaporating. I saw a couple more hands.
Yeah, I think Diana had a question.
Hi. So my question was about the trash, about just like currently there's trash everywhere and we're not sure what to do with it. If we don't want to burn it because it releases a lot of chemicals, and if we don't want to bury it because it leaks into the water, and it ends up in the ocean. Like, what do you think would be like? Obviously, no one solved this issue, so like, there's no wrong answer. But what would be a good way to solve that problem? Like, we're trying to diminish how much trash we make and make more or use more biodegradable things. But what about the trash that we have now that we can't recycle?
So I think that's going to be, so the joke that I often like to say, because I get so overwhelmed thinking about the solutions to this, is that I wish that like Superman would just throw all the garbage into the sun like he did in like the early Superman movies. And I'm telling him myself like how old I am, but there is a Superman movie where Superman takes all the nukes and throws them into the sun. And that's my solution to how we get rid of the plastic that we currently have. But until Superman gets here, I would say that some folks in other countries have actually found very innovative methods for reusing plastic. I mean, I think that I saw something that where there are bricks being built from plastic. I know folks have made rafts with plastic bottles. There are methods that we could be thinking about and innovations that are out and available for us that we could start to incorporate. Like, there are things that we could do. Plastic is strong enough, and a lot of parts of cars are made from plastic. So it is strong enough that we could get some additional uses out of it. So I would, and I randomly saw something on Instagram about a fungus that someone found that actually eats plastic. And so folks are coming up with different methods all the time. It's just that we're not really hearing about them because they're in contradiction to the current method of extraction of how of business as usual. I think. Oh,
One question.
I got a lot of. Okay, hold on. Let's see. All right, Diana. I think I don't want to mispronounce. I think it's Vonday.
So, would that not cause any other problems? The whole taking it to the sun type thing.
Of course it would.
I was like, when you said that, I was like, wait, would that not cause any other problems?
Probably. That's just my quick and dirty go-to answer. It's not the right answer, and it's not the best answer. And if you tell anyone I told you that, I'll deny it. But that is it's just me being silly. But I think that we're definitely going to have to stop the manufacturing of plastic, period. I think we're going to have to pick a date, and that's the date, and it stops. And then we're going to have to invest in and there are alternatives. We see partially the reusable bags. There's also metal straws. And I know folks, certain organizations or certain restaurants are starting to phase plastic straws out, which is a low-hanging fruit, but it is still a part of the overall plastic issue. But I think that we're going to have to look into bamboo, other materials that we have at our disposal that do biodegrade. And I think those are the things and I think that what we as citizens are going to have to do is to start to take these matters into our own hands, as far as going to our legislators and demanding that they take these actions seriously. Okay. I think Dimitri has his hand up.
Where is it? Okay. I just wanted to add earlier on recycling plastic. Mm-hmm. So I can't remember which exactly country it is. It's some Scandinavian, like very north in Europe, probably Denmark or Norway. I'm just not 100% right now. So basically they have found a way to, first of all, pick up plastic from the sea. And then after cleaning it up, recycling it, they are putting it through the 3D printing process. I'm not sure how all this is done. And they are creating literally everything out of recycled plastic that it's not going to be something that they're going to make something that's going to last from something that was plastic one use. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to add this. I find it interesting. I just have no idea how 3D printers and the whole thing works.
Do you have an article? Could you put that in the chat if you have it?
So it's basically a friend of mine who's a designer,
Okay.
slash architect, and he's got. I can ask him when he comes back. He's in Greece, and I'm here. That's not cool.
Nope.
And basically he's got a book where his company gave him. I think I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I will. Yeah, I can't share it right now, unfortunately.
Okay, no problem. I appreciate the idea. Any other questions? I think I might have heard William's voice.
Yes. I was asking you, is your podcast on YouTube?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and it's called The Crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I can send the link or put the link in the chat.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll do that too.
Okay.
Any other questions? And it doesn't have to be about the subject. You can ask me about the podcast. If you have questions about podcasting, I can answer those too.
I'm forwarding a link real quick. I just found on that thing. Okay, I just found something.
Awesome. Okay. And the link I posted will take you to the show on all platforms. Any other questions or comments? Well, if not, I very much so appreciate all of you and your time and attention. And if you have an opportunity to check out my podcast, please do. If you would like to do a little more research on the subject of medical incineration and perhaps kind of help me to craft a little bit more of the solutions to these problems, I would definitely appreciate it. And I will give you your credit, your just due on the show. So if that's something that folks want to do, obviously SEMA has my contact information, and I would very much so appreciate that. I need all the hands I can get.